Hello, welcome to J Lowe Artist YouTube channel. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for drawing with me. Today we're going to be drawing with charcoal. We're going to be using white and black charcoal. They make them in a variety of softnesses, but I'm going to be using just a General's charcoal 4B and your soft General's white charcoal as well. We'll be drawing on gray paper. You can use construction paper. I'm using this XL Canson drawing paper that's kind of just a light gray. You should have a black and white charcoal, a kneaded eraser, and a cotton swab for blending.
Okay, drawing with black and white on gray. One thing you've got to remember is the grays are already done there for you, so there's no reason to blend the light and the dark. We want to kind of keep them separately. But the light is easier to get rid of. It's easier to cover. So, I mean, if I put a little bit of white on there like this, you can still see it, and I can erase it much easier, and I can go over that with my black. Trouble with the black is if I do that, there's always a shadow there. So I'm going to start drawing with my white. I'm going to work out everything with the white. Then I'll add the black. And the cotton swabs are just here to do a little bit of blending. And luckily on the cotton swabs, we have two sides. We're going to have a black side and a white side. Okay, light side, dark side. You know, Yoda side, Darth Vader side. Whatever you want. Okay, so I'm going to set those aside and my black charcoal. And I'm just going to do everything with my white charcoal. So the first thing we want to do is establish our composition. And remember that your subject matter needs to relate to the edges of your paper. And a good composition comes close to touching or touches 3 of the 4 sides of your paper. So that being said, I've already composed this picture a little bit anyway. Her arm and her shoulder and everything really do relate to this edge of the paper. So I'm just going to go in, I'm just going to say, well, I want that arm to be down in here somewhere. So I'm just going to draw that with my white charcoal. And her head is about 1/5 of the size. So if I cut my picture plane up into 5s, and I pretty much can say, okay, that head needs to be about that big. And I can just guesstimate, and then I can use my fingers like calipers and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It'll take me all the way to the edge of the paper, but that's okay. So I'm just kind of guesstimating. I'm going to use this little oval, kind of an egg shape. There's her head. Her chin, if you go straight across from her shoulders, almost level with her shoulder. So I can come down to the bottom of that and say that's about where her shoulder's going to go. There is a little bit of an arch there, and we can get that too. I mean, we'll get all that in. And so we're just simple shapes, simple shapes. I want her hand to be down, about down in here. Her hand is holding a sword. I may or may not put that sword in there. We'll see. That line just tells me which direction the head is going. It's not quite straight up and down. It's slightly at an angle, slightly. So I can do that. And then proportioning, that's one thing that when you're drawing people, you kind of got to know your proportions. If you look at your pectoralis major, your chest muscles, or in this case, you know, the woman's breast, that's one head away from her chin. So if I come up here and I come down here, that's about where her chest is. Not quite, because her head is kind of facing down a little bit, but it's pretty close. So I can figure that out. I can go like this and say, okay, that's about where her chest is. And I can just block that in. The whole torso, I can block that in. If you go down 1.5 heads, or about 1 head from the shoulder down, that's about where her elbow is. And if you think about where the elbow is, that's where the bottom of the rib cage is. And so I can come over here and just go, okay, That's about where the bottom of the rib cage goes, and that's kind of where that bend of the torso goes. Body proportioning is, knowing the human form is very important. If you go down another head, so from the chest and you go down another head, that's about where the belly button goes. So her little belly button's about right down in there. Not that you can see it, but okay. And then you go down another head, not quite, and that's about where her leg starts there. And right where her hip, the hip kind of comes up, that's where the femur, the leg bone kind of comes up, and there's a curve in the leg bone there. That's all right there. You can throw that in. And those are about your proportions. And as I draw, I'm always thinking body proportions. And if I wanted to, I could go in and just throw in kind of where the hair goes. I'm not really concerned that it's exactly perfect, but I just want to get my size and proportions in. Now again, the white is easy to cover up. And so if I just go in there and say, okay, well, her arm is going to come down here. There's the fist, and there's her shield that goes right around there. Starts just below the rib cage there, or rib area. So I'm going to just throw that in nice and round. And though we can't see the end of it, it's going to work for us here because it works our composition better. That round shield, kind of like a Viking shield. I think Wonder Woman's supposed to be Greek, isn't she?
Yeah.
So the Greeks did use round shields. Sometimes they had little cutouts in them. And you can use your kneaded eraser to just get rid of things if you want to. But like I say, the black can cover this up pretty easily. Also, if you wanted to throw in some basic facial proportions, you can. Remember that the eyes are about right in the middle of the head. So if I'm looking from cranium to chin, then the eyes are about right in the middle. And the nose, all I do is put a little dot about right in the middle between the eyes and the chin, and then you go up a little bit. About the width of an eye, you go up. And you can block in where the mouth goes. Now, one thing that you can do, because you've got the white still, is you got to look at the light colors, or the light values. I shouldn't say colors, because they're not really colored. But I can go in with my white pencil, and I can look at like her eyebrow, and I can shade in the light across the eyebrow. And then anything that's dark, you just leave it out. Here's the bridge of the nose. Here's the light across the cheek. So you're going to end up kind of almost drawing like a ghost. It's exactly the same way we do with the dark, with the gray or the black, but now we're just doing it with white. And again, this is just so I can look at that and say, are my proportions correct? You know, and this helps give me kind of a guide too of where things go. I can throw in any of the light parts that I see. You can even throw in some of the light parts like on her little headdress thing there. I don't know what you call it. You call it a crown. You can throw in highlights where the hair is. And again, all this is doing is helping me to see my form, to see my subject here. Because you want to be able to adjust this according to your proportions. And how do you know unless you do a little bit of drawing? So just a little ghost image, that's all we want. It'll make it really pop when we start adding the black to it. But the black is a little intimidating because it doesn't erase easily, doesn't cover easily. So I always start out with the light, and then you can work into the dark. So just pick out the lightest areas. There is a little bit of an attitude change too, because we are so used to looking at the shadows when we draw. But as an artist, you have to recognize both the light and the dark, the positive and the negative. And the earlier you can do that, the more accurate you will be in your drawing. Now go ahead and analyze it. Is it about right? Is it too big, too small? Now's the time to change it. And this white charcoal is easy to change. And if you wanted to, you could even take that white charcoal and start to kind of blend it or smear it around if you'd like. We're going to have to layer more into it, obviously. But you can use that to get those subtle grays. Again, if you need to change something, do it now. Also, when you're doing flesh tones, layering in your grays, your lights, and your darks, rather than trying to go really dark and right at the beginning, layering in those darks and lights are going to give your flesh tones a little smoother quality. I get asked all the time, how do you make it smooth? Well, you start out a little at a time and you just keep layering it in, a little at a time. And then again, analyze it. Is this about right? Your proportions, is it too big, too little? Now I'm just going to start with my black. And I'm going to work back and forth between the black and the white. With the black, I want to do only the darkest areas. So I can come in, I can start like with the hair or with the eyes. I'm just going to do only the darkest areas. And I'm going to kind of block these in like I would, like if this were ink. That's what I'm going to do. So there's like little areas that you can leave out, just like we do with ink. When in doubt, leave it out. Remember that we can smear this, and that we're going to do, that's going to be to our advantage. She has very dark eyes, and so I kind of always start with the rim of the iris, and then you can add a little bit more later on. And remember that we're going to be able to smear this too. Here's the core shadow that goes down her cheek. It's quite dark there, and I know that this isn't as light, but I'm going to be able to smear that down into it. So I just start out with the core shadow. You don't have to go too far with some of those things. You can see my initial light is off, and that's okay because I can cover it up here. I'm going to just go over with the dark. And now I'm just going to bring some of that gray into it. And the more you do, the more you can pick up. You kind of get to pick and choose what part of that you want to accentuate. And this is the technique. And then you just clean up what you need to clean up. I need another edge right there. And the last thing you do is you pick up your highlights with your white charcoal. And that is really what's going to make it pop. Any of your highlights. And you just keep layering in darks and lights until you have it. When you're doing hair, just pick out the darkest areas. Leave the light out, and then a little blending, and then we can take our kneaded eraser back in and pull some out, and a few little highlights, and you'll have it. Don't worry too much about hair. So just like I do with the face, I'm going to go back into the body. I'm going to do the same thing. Smear it, and then I'll pick out those really slight highlights. Grab the highlights and clean it up with your kneaded eraser, and you got it. Don't forget that when you finish loading your cotton swab with charcoal, you can draw with it. You sometimes forget that. I have a tendency to make people a little more idyllic than they really are. Even with portraiture, I remember doing a portrait of a guy. Um, I think he lived in Seattle, somewhere up there. Anyway, uh, he wanted me to do a portrait of he and his wife, and he was a little shorter than his wife was, and his wife was a little more rotund than he was. He was kind of thin. Anyway, so when I did it, I made him a little taller and a little more buff, and her a little thinner and a little shorter. And I thought, oh no, they're going to look at this and go, hey, that doesn't look like us. But instead, they looked at it and went, oh, that looks just like us. So I think sometimes we think of ourselves more idyllic as well. At least we should. Well, there's a lot going on in her outfit. Probably use a lot less white than you normally would think of, especially when you're choosing something that's all gray like that. And it's probably a good thing. So you draw faster. Further you get away from your subject matter, the faster you can draw. Because that's just not where your audience is looking. Plus, you can be a little sketchy as you come down. Everybody wants to know it's a drawing. always have a hard time getting things round. So I usually have to go over it several times until I feel like it's round. Even then, it's probably not round, but that's okay. Nothing's perfect. Like I say, you can leave that one side kind of sketchy. The bottom part can be very sketchy. Good place for a signature would be right behind her hand here or right in front of the shield over on that side. Either way. Hopefully you had fun today. Hopefully you learned something. We're by no means done, but it's all about practice and learning new techniques. So hopefully if we accomplish that, then we're good. And hopefully, somewhere along the way, art is making your life a little bit nicer.